Hey guys, so as promised, I'm going to share the best day of my life so far, my story on my son being brought into the world on March 20th, 2019. I'm sharing this for a few reasons. I know it is kind of personal, but I share a lot with you guys, so I want to make sure this part is captured as well. And it was one of the best days of my life. I want to be able to come back and look at it on here, and this is kind of a scrapbook of my life that even he could come back and watch when he's a little bit older. So another reason is I watched birth stories, birth vlogs, birth blogs, probably my last 6 weeks in my pregnancy every single night for hours. I was just so intrigued by everyone's different stories, like your story will be completely different from mine, but it kind of gave me peace hearing everyone else's. I would ask all my friends, tell me everything, every detail, so it could kind of prepare me. But I mean, of course, my story is a lot different than anyone else's because it's mine. So I'll kind of go back to when I was still pregnant. For anyone who didn't follow me before then, or I haven't talked to, I was like, my son's gonna come early. I was having all of these symptoms up at, like, from 35 weeks. I was dropped, I was having cramping, a bunch of other stuff that comes along with pregnancy, but I was like convinced he's gonna come early, I was telling everyone, I was like telling my fiance, okay, get ready, get these days off work. And what do you know? He waited 8 days after his due date. So I was really frustrated in that time. And now looking back, it's so silly because he's so perfect and it worked out exactly how it was supposed to. He came out and he was healthy, he was chunky, he was, no vernix or anything like that. I think he wanted to stay in there a little bit longer, so I'm super glad he did. But I did get an induction. So from the beginning, my doctor told me, I don't really like to go a week over. Nothing really progresses at that time. So worst comes to worst, we will schedule that induction a week after your due date, which was March 12th. So, I wanted to go into labor naturally. I wanted to feel the contractions or my water breaking or whatever it was, but that wasn't really my story, and that's okay. Maybe next time. But so at my 40-week appointment, he scheduled me for March 19th to go into the hospital at 6 p.m. to get induced. And the day before that, so at 40 weeks, I think the day after my due date, that night I started having really steady contractions. They were about 7 to 10 minutes apart, lasting for 30-45 seconds. They were pretty intense. They were like period cramps, a little bit stronger. And so I was like, oh my God, babe, this is happening. He's like, okay, just wait it out, see what happens. So then I got into the bath because they started getting a little painful and then they stopped. So that happened 5 nights in a row. So you can imagine how frustrated I was, thinking I was going into labor, having all these contractions, and then nothing was progressing. So long story short, Tuesday night we go in at 6 p.m. to get induced, and they didn't have a room available for me. Shocker. I was like, this boy is just teaching me patience. So we waited 2 hours. If I'm looking away, I wrote down notes while I was in the hospital up until I started having some crazy contractions. So I'll just kind of go off my memory from there. So we got into the room at 8 o'clock, and then I got my Cervidil. So if you don't have a baby or anything like that, or you haven't been induced, Cervidil is something that ripens your cervix to get it ready for the Pitocin, which starts your contractions, right? So I got that. I was 1.5 centimeters dilated at that point, and my cervix was medium thickness, whatever that means. So they put in the Cervidil, and they're like, okay, we'll wait 12 hours, and then we'll check you again and see if you're eligible for the Pitocin. I'm like, okay, what happens if I'm not? And they're like, we'll have to do another round. I'm like, wow, this could take a while. So we went to sleep that night. I went to sleep around 11 in the morning, or 11 at night, and I woke up at 5:30 a.m. and my nurse checked me, and I was 2 centimeters dilated. So I went back to sleep. That Cervidil is very uncomfortable, so I didn't really like that. And I was just ready to get the ball rolling. So I went back to sleep, and then my doctor came in and woke me up at 7:30 in the morning. And he checked me and he was like, okay, he's like, let's get this party started. I'm going to break your water. And I was like, I trust my doctor 100%. Like, I loved him from the start. Anything he said to me, I was like, okay, like, you know what you're doing. You've delivered over 1 million babies, like, whatever you think. And obviously I was ready too. So my sisters were there, my mom and Stan, and he broke my water. And then everyone left. Like, they went and got coffee. The doctor left, the nurses, all this stuff. It was just me and my mom in the room. And then I went in and took a shower. So in the shower, I started getting these insane contractions, like had to get on my hands and knees. And I was like, oh my God, like it's like period cramps, like on steroids, I would say. I don't really remember. It's hard to remember because like everything's happening. And then when you meet your baby, like the pain goes away. So you don't really care anymore. But so I did that. And then I got out of the shower and like my contractions were about a minute apart, lasting a minute long, and I swear, like, some of the most pain I've ever felt in my life. And I've had a few surgeries, and yeah, this was really bad. So the only thing that would help me is like when I was squatted down, like holding onto the bed, like the ball wasn't helping, massaging wasn't helping, nothing. And so I was like, wow, I've watched enough birthing vlogs and stuff like that to know if my contractions are 1 minute apart, lasting for this long and this painful, like something has to be going on. Like I have to be progressing pretty quickly. And so my nurse is like, you know, I was like, I need help. Like I need the epidural, I need something. And she was like, no, like you need to like try to stick it out a little bit longer. She was amazing, by the way. You need to try to stick it out a little bit longer and we'll see what happens. And I'm like trying to stay positive. You know, I'm not like a person who was screaming, but like I was like trying to breathe through it and nothing was really working. So I did that for about 45 minutes to an hour. It was funny because like my sisters and Stan went down and got coffee right after he broke my water. And when they came back, I was on hands and knees, like not screaming, but like in agony and pain. So I did that for about 45 minutes and then I told her, I'm like, I don't know if I could do this anymore. Like, and I was so disappointed in myself because I wanted to do natural birth. Well, I wanted to give it a shot. I didn't really have a birth plan. I honestly believe like whatever's meant to happen will happen. And so I kind of went in with an open mind and she was like, okay, why don't we try the nitrous oxide, which is like that gas that you breathe in at the dentist, I think. And I was like, okay. So she got me up on the bed, which killed me, you know, every contraction, like I just wanted to be like down on the floor. And so she checked me and she's like, oh, you're only 3 centimeters. And I lost it. I was like, there's no way, like there's no way that I'm only 3 centimeters, like the amount of pain that I'm in. So that was super discouraging. So I tried the nitrous oxide and I did that for about, I want to say 45 minutes to an hour. And so I think my notes stopped here. Yeah, I literally stopped at 7:50 when I got my, when he broke my water, and because that's how bad my contractions were. And they started a small dose of Pitocin. So where was I? So I did the nitrous oxide. I was going through contractions there and you can like see them on the screen and mine were like so intense. And I didn't really like the nitrous oxide. It made me feel a little bit like stoned and I just didn't like the space that I was in, you know, like I wanted to be in control. It did help the pain a little bit, but I didn't like where I was. So I didn't do that for much longer. I did that for about 45 minutes. And then I was at a 4 at that point after that. And so the anesthesiologist came in and he's like, look, I have a waiting, cause he knew my sister. So he's like, I have a waiting list of 2 hours. Like, if you want to do this, we have to do it now. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Like, I want the epidural. I want to enjoy this experience as much as possible. And like, props to anyone who does it natural because you guys are warriors. Like that was some really intense pain that I was going through. And I'm not someone who will say like, I have a crazy pain tolerance because I don't really know. But yeah, that was really tough for me. So I got the epidural and life was amazing. So I must have gotten that around, I want to say like 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. And then I remember after that, everything was great. I was like watching my contractions go crazy on the screen. I was just chilling in bed. I was FaceTiming my friend, Lisa, and I was like, she's thought the baby was born. I'm like, no, I'm just hanging out, just going through labor. And then all of a sudden the nurses rush in. And it was just me and Stan in the room at that point, and they were being very calm, but I knew something wasn't right. And so this was probably about like 30 minutes to an hour after I got my epidural. And I'm thinking like my body just settled, and he like, okay, so anyway, so they were like, okay, turn on your side. I was like, Lisa, I think I have to go. So they're like, turn on your side. They're like, the baby's playing up. Like they were trying to make super light of it, but his heart rate was like going like really down. And so they were like massaging me, they were making me switch positions, making me go to side, and this was lasting about 3 minutes. So it was kind of scary at that point, but then his heart rate regulated, and so we got to carry on. Then they came in an hour later and we had to do it again. So this little boy was just, you know, maybe not in the right position. Well, actually, I'll tell you why this happened in a second, but so his heart rate kept going down, and come to find out, the cord was wrapped around his neck when he came out. So we just had to like get him out. And so I want to say around, okay, so gas mask, epidural. So I would say around noon, she checked me and I was 5 centimeters dilated. I don't know why time was passing so fast, but it really felt like it went so quick from the time I got my water broken until the time that I had him. So that was about noon. So then after that, the heart rate went down again, and like it was like lasting too long. And so my nurse, she was amazing. And so she was like, okay, you need to get on all fours. And I'm like, ugh, my body's numb, you know, whatever. So he ended up like getting me on all fours, and she sat there and massaged my back and stretched me for 1 hour, like 1 whole hour, you know, moving me side to side, moving my hips side to side, really just like opening up that like space for him to find his way down. So then she did that, like I said, for an hour. And so, after that, I laid back down. His heart rate was regulated at that point. And then 2 p.m. comes around and they check me and they say, okay, you're 7 centimeters dilated. I was like, oh my gosh, like things are happening. And then she said, you know, you've progressed probably about 1 centimeter an hour. And with new moms, that's pretty normal. So you should like, what's the word I'm looking for? You should expect to have him in about 3 hours. And I was like, okay, sounds good. So I told them, I'm like, you know, go home, let the dogs out, like do whatever you have to do. And I asked my nurse, I was like, how am I gonna know that I'm in pain? Or how am I gonna know I'm like about to have him? Because I'm really not in pain at all. And she was like, the epidural is not gonna take the pressure away that you feel when the baby is like coming out. And she was like, when you feel like you have to go to the bathroom, like that's when you'll know. And I'm like, okay, I do feel some like intense pressure down there. And she was like, it will be constant. You'll really know. And I was like, okay. So she left the room, and then like at that point, I was like, I had the shakes, and my body was like uncontrollably shaking. I wasn't cold. I didn't feel nauseous, but like I could not stop. And I was like in la la land a little bit. Like I was like falling asleep, and like my mom was freaking out. She's like, why are you shaking? Like calling the nurse. And like I said, I've read over 1 million birthing stories, and I'm like, okay, like I'm getting to the point where this baby's gonna come out. Like this is the transition period. And I was feeling that intense pressure right down there. So 15 minutes later, after that nurse checked me and said I was 7 centimeters, my doctor came back because he had to do a C-section. So he came back and he was like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, good. She just checked me like 15 minutes ago, but I am feeling some pressure. And he was like, okay, let me just check. So he checks me 10 centimeters. So I went from a 7 to a 10 in 15 minutes. He was like, all right, you're complete. Time to have a baby. I'm like, oh my gosh, like shit's getting real. I was like, and I just told everyone to leave. So Stan was sleeping out on the couch, and like just to catch up on some sleep. But so let me think. So he's like, all right, well, I have to go do this C-section, but I'll be back in like 30, 40 minutes. And I'm like, oh great. So I'm 10 centimeters dilated. I'm laying there, but it was really good because it really got the baby to be where he needed to be. And I missed a really important point. So when they broke my water, the baby had gone to the bathroom in my stomach and like was aspirating it. And so we had to have the NICU in the delivery room because that is really bad. It was in his lungs and all that crap, and it was just like really scary. So he said I was complete, whatever, but I had to wait there for like another 30 to 40 minutes. And then 40 minutes goes by, and I'm like, I asked her to check me a few times. I'm like, I think the baby's head's coming out. Like, it was just crazy pressure. And so I started pushing with the nurses. They come in first and help you push, and you know, they just say really like just push the life out of you, like don't put it in your face, like just your whole body. And so that's what I did, and we did 3 sets of pushes with the nurses, and then his little head came out, like, well, you could feel his head, and then the doctor came in and I pushed twice and he was out. And so it was about like 20-25 minutes of pushing, and he was born at 3:25 p.m. and the cord was wrapped around his neck, like I said, and he did have that meconium. And so unfortunately I couldn't hold him right away, but he put him on my chest, and then he like cut the cord and then handed them to the doctors. And so that part was really hard for me because they had him for about 30 minutes before I got to hold him, and they had to put a tube down his throat and all this different stuff to really get all of that out of there. And so I was really upset because I was like, this is taking way too long. Like, what's going on? Is he okay? Like, all I cared about was holding him. So once we got him in our arms, it was just the most amazing thing you could ever imagine. He started feeding like 15 minutes after he was, you know, on me, and it was just like an instant thing, you know. He would just, it was like I was his mommy and he was my son. So me and Stan took like an hour to ourselves, and then we moved into the room. But my experience in my labor, just even though there was a few things like hiccups, like the doctors and the nurses were so calm that it made me calm. And it was just such a lovely experience that like there was music playing when I was pushing. It was just a great experience, and you know, I wouldn't change it for the world. And I'm so happy that he is my little boy, and he is 5? He's almost 6 weeks now, and he's just precious. He is so amazing. Every day, like, I grow to love him more and more. He's like my best friend. So I think I hear him waking up in there anyway. So I'm so glad that I got to come on here and share this with you guys. Literally the best day of my whole entire life. And so, yeah, if you have any questions, shoot them in my DMs.